and I was listening to, dang it, I was gonna look it up before I started. Like, they didn't, I hate to say this. How do I say this? And this is by... Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. And welcome to the first part of what I read in February. So I don't want to set this up in a way of being like, I read a bajillion books. I think it's probably going to be like 8 or 9 books, but because I talk a ton, there's so much I want to say. I figured I would still break it up into 2 parts. So we're going to talk about 4 of the books I read so far this month. So I've got 2 nonfiction, 2 fiction. I've got a whole bunch of mixed feelings. Let's just get right in. The first book I want to talk about is The Maid by Nita Prose, and I got this through Book of the Month when I had done a collaboration with them back in January. I didn't realize this book was a mystery until I got it, so this was not on my radar at all, and I'm so happy I read it. This book was so good. So my dad actually started reading it, and I started to read it at the same time so we could talk about it. And just had such a fun time reading this book. So this is a debut novel and we follow a girl named Molly. So she is the maid at a hotel and it actually never tells you like what city she's in. I kind of envision she's in New York City, but she never quite tells you what city she's in. But she works at the Regency Grand Hotel and she is Molly the maid. And she puts everything back in order and she takes great pride in her work and her job is basically her everything. So her gran has passed away a few months ago and Molly is all alone in the world. So she's no other family and she's very much struggling with how to go on without her gran because she raised her and she was just her whole life. So the hotel and the staff there is really Molly's only connection with people. And when the book opens, Molly is, up in one of the VIP rooms and she finds the dead body of one of their VIP clients, Charlie Black. And basically, Molly winds up getting tangled into this murder mystery. And she winds up becoming a suspect in the mystery. So, or a suspect in the murder, I should say. And we get like a bit of police investigation. And this is definitely on the cozy side of things. And I just loved it so much. So Molly definitely gave me Eleanor Oliphant vibes. And I just loved her so much as a character. And there's so much about this book that was heartbreaking to me and there was so much about this book that was heartwarming to me, and it's Molly trying to figure out what actually happened that night. And we have a very interesting cast of supporting characters that are in this book, from Charlie Black's wife and other people who work at the hotel, and like I said, we've got the police investigation element of it. And Molly's just one of those characters that I just want to like wrap my arms around and tell her it's going to be okay and just hug her and just, it's just such a good book. I absolutely loved it. I feel like there is going to be a theme of me crying in books. I don't know where my emotions are all over the place, but I really enjoyed this book so much. And I was just, like I said, not expecting it to be so good because I didn't even know what it was about. And it was so well written. Oh, these debuts are just crushing it this year. And I just thought it was smart and it was witty. And I just loved everything about it. I thought it was just so well done. I like how the mystery was crafted. I liked just everything about it so much. And Molly is just so funny, and not even that she's trying to be funny at times. And there's parts where you're just like, Molly, like you just know, like you're like, Molly, oh, like you're just like it's like watching the horror movie where you want to like yell at the screen. Sometimes I wanted to like yell at the book and be like, Molly, no, don't do it, don't do it. Oh, I just loved it so much. I just thought it was such a great book. Highly recommend it, whether you are a deep dark thriller fan. I like me some cozies on the side, and I just thought it was great. I absolutely thought it was great. So my only bummer about debuts is there's no backlist for me to dive into, but my eyes are going to be all over Nita Prose for whatever she does next, and I can't wait. But highly recommend this book. Yes, it's a mystery with a dead body in it. Why didn't I know that sooner? But definitely pick it up, definitely read it. It's such a good book, such a good book. The next book I have is The Night Shift by Alex Finley, and I had an e-arc of this through NetGalley, and this comes out March 1st. So by the time you guys are seeing this, the book is already out. So he wrote Every Last Fear, which I read last year, which I absolutely loved, which was his debut. This was one of my most anticipated books of the year, and I didn't love it. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. And I definitely, like, I did my review and I read a whole bunch of other people's reviews, and I definitely seem to be in the minority here, but it just didn't totally work for me. And I think there was like a few, I know there's a few things that factor into that. So for one, I thought there was gonna be a lot more 1999 going on here. I was here for the 90s vibes. I was here for the Y2K of it all. Like, I wanted that timeline, and we get it in the opening scene, which we are at the Blockbuster on New Year's Eve, 1999. Y2K is coming, like the world is coming to an end. We were all afraid the clocks were gonna strike midnight and everything was just gonna shut down. Surprise, surprise, it didn't. But we open with teenagers working at the Blockbuster Video in their small town in New Jersey, and they all get murdered, except for one who survives that night. No Riley Sager intended. And no one is ever convicted of the crime. So there had been a suspect. He wasn't charged. He got out of Dodge. They never put anyone in jail for what happened back in 1999. And then 15 years later, we have that same small town. We have an ice cream shop. We have a bunch of teenagers working there one night, and they all get murdered. But one of them survives. So the question becomes, do we have a copycat on our hands? Is the original killer from 15 years ago back? Are these connected? Are they not? What's going on in this small town, which is full of secrets and lies and all the great stuff that I love? And I really, 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 really wanted to love this book. And I just, I didn't feel thrilled. I didn't feel tension. I shouldn't say I didn't feel thrilled. I didn't feel the tension of the book. I was page turning because I wanted to know what was gonna happen next, but I never felt any kind of amped up tension or threat, or like even in scenes where there should have been tension and threatening kind of vibes going on, I just wasn't feeling it. And I think a whole bunch of that was because I wasn't connecting to the characters at all. So we get 3 POVs. So we get a survivor from the Blockbuster massacre who in present day is a therapist, and she winds up getting called in to help with the current day massacre to talk to the survivor of that massacre, who we don't get a POV from, but we get a lot of her. And then we get the POV of FBI agent Sarah Keller, who was in Every Last Fear, and she is brought into the case to help solve it. And then we get a guy named Chris who works in the DA's office, who is trying to find out what happened in the current case, and he's got a whole bunch of baggage of his own as well, which I love. But I did not connect with any of the characters, and I really feel like the female characters were not well represented, fleshed out. They didn't feel like real female characters to me. I'm trying to figure out like how to say this right. But like, I feel like there wasn't a woman who read the book to sort of vet the female characters, because they're written by a man, and I didn't feel like they felt like real women. In that, for example, Sarah Keller is 8.5 months pregnant with twins, and she is out in the field working the case, literally chasing down the bad guys, which just doesn't feel believable to me. And then just some of the, like, the language or like the inner monologue that some of the women were having with themselves, like I was just like, real women don't talk that way. Like, it sounded either kind of cliche, seen this on TV, or cliche fantasy of how women might be, but they just didn't feel authentic to me. And I feel like it needed like not like a sensitivity reading, but like an authenticity reading by somebody. So I don't know, some of these things might change before like the full version comes out. Again, it wasn't ARC, maybe they'll make her 5.5 months pregnant, so it feels a little bit less weird. But I got so hung up on all of that stuff, and then I had some open questions that I didn't feel were really answered. And then I really liked one of the side characters, Atticus, and I wanted more of him because I thought he was really interesting and we didn't get enough of him. So I feel like the issues were like, I wanted it to be something different, but I also feel like Every Last Fear was just a much more well-written, intricately plotted mystery, and this just didn't give me what I wanted. And I was so bummed about it because I wanted to love this book. I really wanted to love this book. So take me with a grain of salt because everybody else seems to be loving this book. And it could just be a case of just like not for me. So I'm super happy I read it. I mean, it's like I said, it happens. It's totally fine. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't as great as I wanted it to be, which left me feeling disappointed. I hate that. The first audiobook I listened to is We're Gonna Need More Wine by Gabrielle Union. And this is her first memoir that came out in 2017. So this is stories that are funny, complicated, and true. So I had heard about this one on Sarah's bookshelves. I always have to pause. Sarah's Nightstand is my friend with the BookTube channel. Sarah's Bookshelves is a podcast. I need to make a video, you guys, on the bookish podcast and like all the podcasts that I'm listening to, and I'm gonna do it. There's so many things I'm gonna do. But she was talking about, I feel like she was even talking about her new book, which I just started listening to this morning, and I don't want to say the wrong title, so bear with me while I check it on my phone. You Got Anything Stronger. So this is her newer book that came out. I want to say it even came out this year, and no, like last year, 2021. I don't even know what day it is, you guys. This came out in September of 2021. So I listened to the first one first, and now I'm listening to the second one. But I, like many people, know Gabrielle Union as the actress, and I didn't know really anything about her personal life other than the fact that she was married to Dwayne Wade, and I don't even know much about him. Like, I'm not a big basketball person, so I don't know a lot about him as an athlete, but I always enjoyed the characters she played, and when I saw her like in interviews and stuff, she seemed like the kind of person I would want to be friends with. Like, she just seemed like a girl's girl, good time, honest, fun stories, like all of it when I see her in interviews, when I see her and her husband in interviews. I'm a big advocate of the E! Network to get my news. So when I heard great things about this from the podcast, I was like, I need to know. So I did not know what she talked about in this book, and I just figured it was gonna kind of be like celebrity memoir, kind of in the vein of like the Rob Lowe one that I read and the Demi Moore one. There are so many stories in this that I like had to sit down when I was listening to it because I didn't know how personal this was going to get. I didn't know how in-depth she was going to get, how honest she was. This is definitely like Band-Aid is ripped off, nothing is held back. She tells so much of her personal story, and it is impactful, and it is, I cried when I was listening to this book. I was laughing my butt off when I was listening to this book. She's such a great storyteller. She narrates it herself, if I haven't already mentioned that part of it. And it was just such an interesting stories, because it's all these little vignettes, but I loved it. So she talks about everything from sexuality and beauty and assault and Hollywood and bad marriages and bad relationships and like what it means to be a woman and the expectations that are placed upon you and struggles she's had with her family. And it is just, nothing is held back. Everything is on the table. And I absolutely was just like shook by so many of the stories that she told. So I was not aware of the fact that she had been a victim of sexual assault when she was, I want to say like 18 or 19 years old. And she tells the story in such raw, again, honesty. I'm just going to say the word honesty so many times over. And that was like one of the times where I literally just had to like stop what I was doing and sit down and just listen. And it was just so powerful in her honesty and her rawness of the situation and the aftermath of it and just sort of everything going through her head. And it's definitely, there's a lot of trigger warnings for this book, but I just found it just so beautifully well done. And I think, like I say, that honesty of it, and it's an apples and oranges, but the Jessica Simpson book to me, which I also went into pretty blind, she was so honest in her book as well. And like, I'm gonna say like the word, like, it was shocking to me, not in like a, oh my goodness, but like in an, like, wow, like you guys are not holding anything back. And it's impressive to me because I have to think, as a celebrity and people who are very protective of their privacy, that to be this open is just, to me, like, shocking that they are putting it all out there. And I am grateful for it in many ways. And I felt like it's just such a moving book, and there's so many parts of her that were relatable to me and what she went through and different struggles. And I just think it's really well done. And it's not, like I said, it's not for the faint of heart in some ways. She's a fan of the 4-letter word. I do not consider myself a prude in any shape or form, but there are certain parts where I did think it was a little bit crass and maybe didn't need to be, but maybe that is me being a little bit more of a prude than I think that I am. But I, as a whole, very much enjoyed it. It's very well written, and it's not a book that's linear from like, I was born here and this is the last movie I did. She definitely jumps around a lot. And I'll be very curious about her second book. So I just started it, like I said, this morning. So the second book opens with her struggle with miscarriages and having a child. And I think I'm like 10% in, but I'll be very curious to see how her story continues and how the story continues. The one thing that I was missing from book number 1, and maybe we get it in book number 2, is she wasn't someone who, like, at 5 years old knew she wanted to be an actress. Like, it's definitely something that she came into, but she never talks about sort of how that acting bug sparked with her. So she talks a lot about like early things that she did and like Bring It On, and some of her more like Being Mary Jane, some of her more well-known shows that she did. And she's already starting to talk about it in book number 2 as well. But I don't know what that catalyst moment was for her, which I'm always curious about with people, but that's just my own greediness wanting to know. But I really found it interesting, and I very much enjoyed it. So I'm glad I picked it up. Podcasts are definitely gateways for me into some really, really great books, and I enjoyed it so much. The next book I have is Sex and the City and Us: How 4 Single Women Changed the Way We Think, Live, and Love. So yes, this is about the TV show, and this was written by Jennifer Keshing Armstrong, and the audiobook was done by Joy Osmansky. And I was listening to the podcast Book Talk, etc., and they mentioned this book, which I hadn't even known existed. This book actually came out in 2018, and I was a huge Sex and the City fan. Like, obsessed. I found it in season 2, went back, was with it till the bitter end. I watched the first movie and then I stopped. So I haven't seen the new show. I didn't watch the second movie. The first movie even kind of hurt my heart a little bit, but I did watch it. And I was living in the city at the time, so I actually went to a Times event with Sarah Jessica Parker talking about the movie, which was super interesting. So like so many people, I really just loved the show. It was such a like moment in time, and just I loved it so much. So this book is very interesting because it takes a look back, obviously, at the show from Candace Bushnell's like first glimmer of it, how she was writing, sort of her life in the city and what she was doing and how she was living before this was even like a glimmer of anything, and then how the show became the show, like how it came to be with Darren Star, and how all the writers were brought on, how all the actors and actresses were brought on. And this is definitely for super fans of the show. If you don't watch the show, skip right by this part. But I loved it because part of it is I have like a book after the show came out, like when the finale ended back in 2004, and it's like season by season, and it's pictures from every episode, and it's the clothes, and it's the stories, and it's the relationships and all of it, and it's just like a fun, great coffee table book. But this actually takes a really interesting look back, not just on the cultural impact that the show had, which I feel like can really get lost today because of what is on TV and what you can get away with, not just on like regular mainstream TV, but what's on cable. but just how groundbreaking the show was, not just for what it was talking about at the time, but how it was filmed cinematically and sort of how it was literally filmed on the streets of New York City, which shows like Friends and Seinfeld and all these other shows that pretended to be in New York didn't do, and how it brought not even more shows to New York, but how it helped bring tourism to the city. It helped create jobs in the city for filmmakers and for people who worked on sets and TV shows, and just like a very interesting look at how everything from like that throwaway burger line of like, he's just not that into you, turned into a movie and turned into a best-selling book, and like how it changed people's lives. Literally having any part of the show just change people's lives. And it also takes a look back on like everything that's wrong with the show, from its complete lack of diversity, how it was not reflective of what was going on in New York City, and then also how other people related to the show and the critics on it, and it just, the part the fashion played and the part the city played, and whether or not there was drama between the girls, and the relationships and the messages, and how the show originally, you know, was about Carrie not needing anyone, and how it still wound up having that storybook ending. But it was so reflective and so interesting, and I just loved it. And it of course makes me want to watch Sex and the City from the beginning. I haven't watched the show in its entirety, and I can't even tell you how long. And yes, I have all 7 DVDs, since season 6 was 2 separate seasons. And I just love it so much. And it just was so great. It was such great nostalgia. It brings me back to a time in my life where I was, like, made me think about so many things, and just, again, the impact it had, and even TV shows that came from it. And it's so funny, like, how many people were like, came to New York to have that Sex and the City lifestyle and wound up having the Girls life instead, which is what I love about Girls and Lena Dunham. Like, I'm a huge fan of that show as well. But this was such great nostalgia. I absolutely loved it. And like I said, if you're a fan of the show, I highly recommend it. And it does dissect certain episodes, and it does dissect certain relationships. And I just found it all like really fascinating. I love that inside track on things, and it was just really, really well done. And I love, from kind of a behind the scenes writer standpoint even, there's a lot about the writer's room and how the storylines were created, and even Michael Patrick King's background, which I didn't really know, and Darren Star, I know, did 90210, but like how he became involved, and just how much of their real lives of the writers in the writer's room came into the TV show. So anyway, I will keep on talking about it, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I raise a Cosmo to this book. It was so good. I had such a good time with it. So that's gonna do it for just the quick part 1 of what I read in February. Let me know what your favorite book so far was, if you had one. Did you have a bummer? What are you reading next? What's going on with you? Let me know whatever you want to let me know. But always, 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 thank you guys so much for hanging out and spending some of your time with me. And I'll be back soon with another video, and I will see you when that happens. Take care, guys. Bye.